I'm Eric Njoka, and this is World of Africa on WION World is One. Thank you for joining us. This week, the countdown to polls in Ivory Coast begins, and the nation's opposition parties, including that of former Credit Suisse chief executive Thiam, have launched a wave of protests after their leaders were struck from the ballot, fueling uncertainty of the future of one of West Africa's star economies. We'll talk about that shortly. The show starts now. The African Union is backing calls to correct how Africa is represented on the world map. Advocates say the widely used Mercator projection distorts the continent's true size, shrinking Africa while enlarging regions like Europe and North America. Here is our cover report this week. Created for navigation, the Mercator projection enlarges land near the poles like North America and Greenland, while shrinking Africa and South America. AU Deputy Chairperson Selma Malika Haddadi says the map falsely portrays Africa as marginal, despite being the world's second largest continent and home to over 1 billion people. Critics argue the Mercator's distortions shape how Africa is seen in education, media and policy, influencing identity and pride, especially among children.
In fact, I think that this has several ramifications. It might seem to be just a map, but in reality, it is not.
I think the real life implications of it is that when you're dealing with something that is much bigger than it is, your policies towards it, your investment into it are actually impacted because you're basing it on incorrect information.
Criticism of the Mercator map is not new. But the Correct the Map campaign, led by advocacy groups Africa, No Filter and Speak Up Africa, has revived the debate, urging organizations to adopt the 2018 Equal Earth projection, which tries to reflect countries' true sizes.
We really wanted to make sure that we picked and that we pushed for the use of the projection that was the closest to reality. So for us, I think that beyond everything, we very much want people to know that there are alternatives to the Mercator projection.
The AU will advocate for wider map adoption and discuss collective actions with member states. The Mercator projection is still widely used, including by schools and tech companies. Google Maps switched from Mercator on desktop to a 3D globe view in 2018, though users can still switch back to the Mercator if they prefer. On the mobile app, however, the Mercator projection remains the default.
The African Union supports this campaign and sees that this campaign, through various actions aimed at promoting this really accurate mapping and addressing historical inaccuracies. So being closely aligned with the AU broader goals of reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage.
The campaign says it has sent a request to the United Nations geospatial body, UNGGIM. A United Nations spokesperson says that once they received it, it must be reviewed and approved by a committee of experts. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One. 83-year-old President Alassane Ouattara announced last month that he would seek a fourth term in October's elections, arguing that a 2016 constitutional change had reset the clock on his already 14-year tenure of the world's largest cocoa producer. Although candidates have until the final week of August to register, Ouattara's path appears clear after Thiam was removed from the electoral roll in April by an Abidjan court on the grounds that he was a French citizen at the time of the registration. Another opposition figure, former President Laurent Gbagbo, remains barred from running because of a conviction linked to the country's second civil war. Here is a report.
Former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo rallied supporters in Abidjan criticizing incumbent President Alassane Ouattara's bid for a fourth term ahead of October's presidential election. Gbagbo, leader of the African People's Party of Côte d'Ivoire, addressed a large crowd of chanting supporters, many holding posters with his image. Banners opposing Ouattara's re-election attempt were prominently displayed. Gbagbo, along with former Prime Minister Guillaume Soro, is barred from running in the upcoming election due to criminal convictions related to the country's 2010 to 11 post-election crisis.
Why would anyone want to serve 4 terms in Côte d'Ivoire? Why? Why would anyone believe that? I refuse.
Last month, the African Court on Human and People's Rights rejected petitions from both Gbagbo and Soro challenging their exclusion from the electoral process. The decision has further complicated Ivory Coast's political landscape, with several opposition figures unable to contest the October 25 vote.
The 3rd term he is currently finishing is even illegal, but not content with completing an illegal 3rd term, he wants to run for a 4th. I would like all of you here to go and tell him that he will not serve a 4th term.
As Gbagbo was rallying his supporters in the capital, bullet-riddled buildings still line some streets in Ivory Coast's former rebel capital, Bouaké. But in the run-up to his 3rd re-election bid, President Alassane Ouattara is keen to turn the city into a symbol of recovery. It was the first time Bouaké hosted independence festivities in over 60 years, sending the message that peace has returned after the civil war that preceded Ouattara's swearing-in 2011. Yet away from the pomp of official ceremonies, ex-combatants and other Bouaké residents tell a more complex story of lingering division and economic struggle.
Celebrating independence in Bouaké shows that the crisis is completely behind us, and that today the country is truly unified. On the economic front, don't forget that Bouaké is the 2nd economic capital of Ivory Coast. Obviously, the movement of the head of state, all institutions and all these populations to bowake for this event will create economic enthusiasm, tourism dynamism, and all this will help boost the economy of the Gbagbo region.
Ivory Coast, the world's biggest cocoa producer, effectively split in 2 after a rebellion in 2002 against then-President Laurent Gbagbo. And Bouaké became the headquarters of the new force's rebels, many of them from Ouattara's Dioula ethnic group. The war was largely a result of xenophobic policies against farmers from Burkina Faso and Mali that also targeted northern Ivorians with cultural ties to them. Thousands of UN peacekeepers deployed and new elections were held in 2010, but Gbagbo refused to accept defeat with Ouattara, setting off 4 months of violence that killed around 3,000 people. Ouattara, a former international banker who announced last month he would seek re-election, is widely credited for Ivory Coast's steady economic growth since he took office.
Bouaké is on the path to reconciliation, and we are working so that populations living in the communal territory and in the regional territory can reconcile through concerted actions, through concerted activities. This is the work we do in the regions and locality.
The exclusion of Gbagbo and Thiam, leader of the opposition PDCI party, from the next ballot means the climate could be tense again when Ivorians vote on October 25. Doumbia is nevertheless optimistic that these issues can eventually be resolved for good. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
Despite global thirst for key tech material, miners in rebel-held Rubaya toil in poverty, mired in conflict and unrest. Rubaya lies in the heart of the eastern DRC, a mineral-rich area of the Central African nation that for decades has been haunted by conflict between government forces and different armed groups, including the Rwanda-backed M23, whose recent resurgence has escalated the violence.
Under the watchful eye of M23 rebels in the hills around the Congolese town of Rubaya, a line of men in rubber boots ferry sacks full of crushed rocks up winding paths cut into the slopes. The laborers are hauling coltan ore, a mineral that powers the modern world. The ore will be loaded onto motorbikes and eventually shipped thousands of kilometers away to Asia. There it's processed into tantalum, a heat-resistant metal that fetches more than $300 a kilogram and is in high demand by makers of mobile phones, computers, aerospace components, and gas turbines. Rubaya produces around 15% of the world's coltan, all dug manually by impoverished locals who earn a few dollars per day. Control of this mine is the biggest prize in a long-running conflict in this Central African nation.
When the Congolese soldiers were managing this mine, there was too much harassment. There were many different taxes, and often we, the diggers, were not paid. And even if we got something, it was poorly paid, around 3,000 to 5,000 Congolese francs. But today, since the M23 took control of the area, the situation has clearly improved. We are treated better, and the number of taxes has decreased.
The area was seized in April 2024 by M23, a rebel group the United Nations says has plundered Rubaya's riches to help fund its insurgency, backed by the government of neighboring Rwanda. The heavily armed rebels, whose stated aim is to overthrow the government in Kinshasa and ensure the safety of the Congolese Tutsi minority, captured even more mineral-rich territory in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo this year. The United States Treasury sanctioned other alleged participants in minerals smuggling in Congo, including Pareco FF, a pro-government Congolese militia that the US said controlled the Rubaya mining site from 2022 to early 2024, prior to M23's takeover.
L'exploitation de cette mine est une exploitation artisanale.
The exploitation of this mine is artisanal. There's no heavy machinery there. It's people who are doing the mining. I wonder how such an operation could possibly be the source of financing for a project like the AFC, which is now a Congolese project. No, that's false.
Simply reaching Rubaya's sprawling beehive-like maze of pits is a major undertaking. Activity in Rubaya begins before dawn, when thousands of miners descend on the pits cut into the rolling hills of Congo's North Kivu province, where many toil in 12-hour shifts. The tunnels can be as deep as 15 meters underground. Once fragments of ore are dislodged, porters carry sacks of the rubble to the surface, where laborers have dug shallow basins that are filled with water. There, other workers, including women and children, wash the ore and separate it from sand and other debris before laying it into the sun to dry. The journalists were supervised by unarmed M23 personnel throughout their visit to the mining area. a reporter saw a rebel official jotting down in a notebook how many sacks each porter, covered in a fine white dust, carted to each collection point. Once the ore is dry, it is stacked on the backs of motorbikes that carry it to one of several depots in the nearby town of Rubaya, where it is sold to traders.
I am a buyer at Rubaya. I purchase minerals here. I only buy in small quantities. If the minerals are not dried, I dry them, and then I store them in my depot. Right now we're working in safety. There's no tight harassment. Before, there were threats, but currently we are working without any issues.
Some US entrepreneurs have also set their sights on Rubaya's coltan treasure as President Donald Trump seeks to broker a peace deal to end the conflict and promote development of the region's mineral wealth. In Congo, those riches include huge reserves of cobalt, gold, copper, lithium and diamonds, in addition to coltan. The country's formal mining sector at present is dominated by Chinese companies. Some US lawmakers are pushing back. In an August 8th letter to Trump and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, more than 50 Democratic Congress members criticized what they said was the administration's lack of transparency in its negotiations with the DRC. They also raised concerns about a potential conflict of interest in a Trump ally angling for rights to develop the Rubaya mine. The US-backed accord does not include M23. The rebel group is part of a separate parallel mediation led by Qatar that seeks to end hostilities. The success of those talks in Doha is key to any lasting peace and in making Rubaya safe for investment and development by Western mining interests. Some diplomats and analysts are dubious about the prospects for a speedy resolution. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
The Malian military government started returning home the historic manuscripts of Timbuktu, which were spirited out of their fabled northern city when it was occupied by Al-Qaeda-linked militants more than a decade ago. Islamic radicals destroyed more than 4,000 manuscripts, some dating back to the 13th century. After they seized Timbuktu in 2012, and that's according to the findings of a United Nations expert mission. They also destroyed 9 mausoleums and a mosque's door, all but one of the buildings on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Here's a report.
More than a decade after narrowly escaping destruction by Islamist militants, ancient manuscripts finished their journey back to Timbuktu last week, as Mali's military government returned over 200 crates of historical documents to the fabled desert city. The manuscripts, some dating to the 13th century, were hastily evacuated to Mali's capital Bamako in 2013, when Al-Qaeda-linked militants set fire to the Ahmed Baba Institute, burning thousands of priceless documents. The return of these rescued texts marks a symbolic victory for Malian authorities seeking to assert control over the region, even as security concerns linger.
These manuscripts were, some years ago, forced to leave their ancestral library and seek refuge in Bamako due to the dark hours endured by this region, marked by terrorist occupation and the threat of destruction of our precious heritage.
The documents, weighing approximately 5.5 tons, represent a fraction of Timbuktu's vast literary heritage, much of which was saved by local families and scholars during the 2012-2013 crisis. Their return comes just months after a series of coordinated attacks by the jihadist group Jama'at Nasr al-Islam wal-Muslimin in and around Timbuktu. In June, JNIM launched assaults on multiple military sites, including a suicide car bombing near the airport. killing between 30 and 60 Malian soldiers, according to various reports. About 706 kilometers from Bamako, Timbuktu sits on the edge of the Sahara Desert and has a dry climate. For years, the local municipal and religious authorities have asked for the return of the manuscripts. Mali, along with neighboring Burkina Faso and Niger, has long battled an insurgency by armed militants, including some allied with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group. Following 2 military coups, the ruling junta expelled French troops and instead turned to Russia for security assistance. Still, 13 years after the occupation of Timbuktu, the security situation in Mali remains precarious, and analysts say it has worsened in recent months. Although the city is back under government control, militants continue attacking its surroundings, including as recently as last month.
If we look at the period from the arrival of the armed forces in 2021 to now, there's been a real change. Before, there were practically daily kidnappings, targeted killings, and carjackings. But now, there's been a real calm. We genuinely feel safer.
The manuscripts, which UNESCO has designated as part of the World Cultural Heritage, cover a myriad subjects, from Islamic theology and jurisprudence, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, history, and geography. They are a testimony to the rich cultural heritage of the Mali and Songhai empires in West Africa.
The most important thing, according to the 1972 convention that governs world heritage, is that a cultural object only has value within its context, within its environment. Therefore, the manuscripts of Timbuktu must be displayed and housed in Timbuktu.
Since August 2023, Timbuktu has been under periodic siege by JNIM, leading to food shortages and displacement of thousands of residents. Despite these challenges, local officials view the manuscript's return as crucial for preserving Timbuktu's heritage. Africa Bureau, WION World is One.
The resurgence of vinyl is global. Analysts, research and markets experts the worldwide value of vinyl markets to be worth $3.4 billion by the year 2032. It comes as no surprise to James Rugami, who's been selling singles from Nairobi's Kenyatta market for decades. For him, preserving old vinyl records is especially important in African nations that have experienced conflict, where historical collections may have been lost or abandoned. Here is his story.
Frozen in time is this thriving little record store within Nairobi's Kenyatta market in Kenya. It's been preserving African cultural heritage for over 3 decades, curating a rare collection of vinyl records that mainly consist of classic African rhythms. Most record stores in Kenya have been closed down after being replaced by streaming services and pirated music. However, music lovers from across the world continue to come here and pay a premium fee to purchase some of the rarest African music. 69-year-old James Rugami, alias Jimmy, has been operating the store since 1989. He was inspired to open the shop to fight against piracy.
See, when cassettes came and manufacturers started manufacturing cassette decks with 2 decks whereby you can dub a cassette, that is what started killing musicians. With vinyl records, you are sure to be dealing with the real thing. So that's why I decided to get stuck.
Enthusiasts for Kenyan benga, Swahili pop, Congolese dance music, and Afro-Cuban classics usually find what they're looking for here. They used to be played on the radio, but not anymore. Most of the production houses making this type of music closed down, leaving no archives, so there are few records in circulation.
All African records are hard to find, apart from South Africa. South Africa, in South Africa, there were many producers and pressing machines, which I think still worked till late. But now, other music like Congolese music, because of the strife in the country for quite a long time, Somalia, Ethiopia, instability made it like carrying around records from one place to another. That's extra baggage, so they are just discarded.
Nairobi has always prided itself in being East Africa's entertainment hotspot with international record labels such as Polygram and Emmy signing bands from Kenya, Tanzania, and Congo. Rugami holds on to vinyl and criticizes younger, the generation for a lack of interest in African roots music. His persistence with vinyl has been rewarded with a rise in sales globally. According to research done by Research and Markets, one of the world's largest market and research stores, the global vinyl record market size reached $1.8 billion in 2023. It is projected to reach $3.4 billion by 2032.
Jimmy's is really like a time capsule back into the age of the Benga music, when music was being made to tell the story of people's experiences, during these amazing times of Kenya's history. And Jimmy's store, when you come here, you always feel like you're walking back into and seeing history on the in all of the music, but also the stories that Jimmy has as well.
For Jimmy, his love of vinyl has been vindicated, and he's looking forward to many more years in his little shop in Kenyatta Market. Africa Bureau, WION, World is One.
And that's all the buzz in Africa this week. Get in touch with us on all our social media platforms and our website and share your story with us from the continent. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Njoka. Thank you for watching this week's episode of World of Africa on WION World is One. It's goodbye from me.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Yo One Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy, each uniquely customized